大家好，我是 Jenny， 欢迎来到沉思者J。今天我们要说的这个人，你可能在网络上看过她的照片，一个戴着圆眼镜的小老太太，身穿黑色法袍，颈上挂着花边领子，看起来瘦小，看起来安静。但你知道吗？美国最强硬的保守派政客都怕她。她叫鲁斯拜德金斯伯格，人们叫她RBG。美国联邦最高法院大法官，20世纪美国性别平等法律革命最重要的推手之一。他身高154公分，体重不到50公斤，但他用了几十年的时间，一个案子接着一个案子，一份判决书接着一份判决书，改变了美国女性的法律地位。他说他做这些事，不是为的是让人记住他，而是为的是让下一代的女孩有一个他年轻的时候没有的世界。今天我们就来说说 Rbg 的故事，一个用法律作为工具的人，一个在逆境里不停工作的人，一个直到生命最后一刻都没有放弃战场的人。鲁斯拜德金斯伯格1933年3月15日出生，地点是美国纽约市布鲁克林区。他的父亲纳桑拜德是从乌克兰移民来美国的犹太人。他的母亲西利亚·拜德比父亲受过更多教育。西利亚是一个非常有知识的女性，但她的时代没有给她机会接受高等教育。西利亚把所有对教育的渴望都投注在女儿身上。她对年幼的鲁斯说：“做一个独立的人，做一个能够自己养活自己的人。”西利亚在鲁斯高中毕业的前一天去世了。那一天，鲁斯没有哭。他说他的母亲让他知道眼泪不能解决问题，但母亲留下的这句话，他记了一辈子。1950年，鲁斯进入了康奈尔大学，在那里他主修政治学，也在那里认识了她后来的丈夫马丁金斯伯格。马丁是一个很特别的人，他是那个时代少有的真正相信妻子的知识和能力的男性。他对鲁斯的崇拜是发自内心的。他说他认识的所有人里面，鲁斯是最聪明的。他们在鲁斯大学毕业后不久结婚。1956年，鲁斯进入了哈佛大学法学院。那一年，全班500多名学生里，只有9个是女性。院长在开学的时候办了一个招待会，请这9个女学生到他家里，然后问了他们一个问题：你们占了本来可以给男性的名额，你们觉得你们有什么理由在这里？鲁斯说他回答了。他说他在这里是因为他想了解丈夫的工作，这样可以更好地支持他的事业。他后来说这是他说过最荒谬的谎言之一，但在那个时代那是唯一让人接受的答案。在哈佛的时候，他是哈佛法律评论的成员，那是法学院里最有声望的学术刊物。他的成绩优异，但同时她的丈夫马丁被诊断出睾丸癌，那是一种非常严重的病，在1950年代那几乎是死亡判决。鲁斯在照顾生病丈夫的同时，继续上她自己的课，也去上马丁的课，把课堂笔记整理好给他，让他可以在床上继续跟上学业。马丁最后康复了，但鲁斯也因为马丁工作的关系，在哈佛读完2年之后必须搬到纽约。他转学到哥伦比亚大学法学院，在那里完成了最后1年的学业，并且以全班最高的成绩毕业。哥伦比亚大学法学院全班第一，同时也是哈佛法律评论的成员。按道理说他应该很容易找到好的工作，但没有律师事务所愿意雇佣他。原因有3个：她是女性，她是犹太人，她是母亲。这3个在当时看来几乎无法克服的障碍，把所有的大门都关上了。他后来说他知道自己面对的是神魔。他说他没有时间愤怒。他说他要找到另一条路。他最终进入了学术界，成为罗格斯大学的法学教授，后来又去了哥伦比亚大学任教。她是哥伦比亚大学法学院第1位获得终身教职的女性教授。在当教授的同时，他开始了对美国性别歧视法律的系统性研究和挑战。1972年，他创立了美国公民自由联盟的妇女权利项目。 这个项目的目标就是要透过法律诉讼，一步一步地拆除美国法律体系里对女性的系统性歧视。他的策略非常聪明，他没有直接选择最明显的女性受害案例，他选的是男性受到性别歧视的案例。他知道，如果他能让男性法官理解因为性别而受到不公平对待是什么感受，他就更容易赢得他们的支持。比如他选的一个案子，是一个叫做查尔斯·莫里兹的男性，因为是男性而被拒绝申请照顾年老母亲的税务减免。那个时代的法律认为照顾老人只是女性的事情，男性不需要这个减免。鲁斯把这个案子一路打到联邦法院，赢了。他说那个案子里有个有趣的故事，当他把所有因性别而给予不同待遇的法条列出来的时候，清单长达100页。国防部的律师看到这份清单，吓了一跳，因为他说如果这些法条都违宪，军队里的很多规定也要跟着改。鲁斯说他当时想的是的，正是这样。1980年，卡特总统任命他为联邦上诉巡回法院法官，他在那个位置工作了13年，建立了深厚的法律声望。1993年，克林顿总统任命他为联邦最高法院大法官，她成为美国历史上第2位女性最高法院大法官，在她之前只有桑德拉·戴欧康纳。在最高法院里，金斯伯格很快就以他的异议意见闻名，每当多数法官做出他认为错误的判决，他就会撰写强有力的异议书。他的异议书不只是法律文件，他们是论述清晰的声明，告诉所有人，这个判决是错的，这是为什么，历史终将改正这个错误。有一个著名的例子，2006年最高法院对一个性别薪资歧视案的判决，多数法官以程序理由否决了一个女性员工的诉求。金斯伯格写了一份充满力量的异议书，他说这个判决忽视了现实世界的运作方式，薪资歧视往往是一点一滴积累的，受害者通常要很久才能发现。他的异议书引发了广泛的公众讨论，最终促成了美国国会在2009年通过了新的立法，直接以异议书里的论点为基础。这就是金斯伯格的方式，他的异议不只是说不同意，他的异议是在推动一个对话，是在告诉未来，他对未来有期待。在最高法院工作期间，他同时面对了严重的健康挑战。1999年，他被诊断出结肠癌；2009年，他被诊断出胰脏癌；2018年肺部手术；2020年又是胰脏癌复发。每一次，他都在最短的时间内回到了最高法院的席位上。有一个广为流传的故事，1999年结肠癌手术后不到2周，他就出席了最高法院的口头辩论。没有人知道他当时身体有多虚弱，他说他必须在那里，因为他有工作要做。2010年代的美国社群媒体上出现了一个让很多人意外的现象，一个70多岁的最高法院法官变成了年轻人的文化偶像，人们开始叫他出名的 RBG， 在 T 恤上印他的脸，在贴纸上印他的语录，他的花边领子成为的是权威和反抗的象征。他说他对这件事感到又惊讶又高兴。他说如果更多年轻人对法律和公民权利感兴趣，那这一切都是值得的。2020年9月18日，鲁斯拜德金斯伯格因胰脏癌复发去世，享年87岁。他去世的消息传出时，美国最高法院前面聚集了数以万计的民众，他们点燃烛光，他们把鲜花堆在阶梯上，他们哭泣，他们沉默。很多人说那个夜晚他们感觉失去了什么重要的东西，不只是一个法官，而是一众对法律可以实现公正的信念。金斯伯格生前说过一句话，让我印象非常深刻。他说他问过在最高法院工作多久才算够，他的答案是，等到我做不动了为止。他做到了他说的话。鲁斯拜德金斯伯格的一生让我们看到几件事。第一，策略和正义可以并行。 她在打性别平等的法律战役时，不是用愤怒作为武器，她用的是精密的策略思考。她知道要赢的对手，有时候要从对手能够理解的角度出发，这需要智慧，也需要耐心。第二，身体的限制不能定义一个人的贡献。她在几十年里多次对抗严重的疾病，但她每次都回到工作岗位。她说工作让她有力量。她说只要她还能做，她就要继续做。第三，意义是一众爱的形式。她的意义书是她说我不同意的方式，但更深层地说，那些意义书是她写给未来的信，是她对法律和公正的信念的最清晰的表达。她相信未来会纠正今天的错误，她要确保那个记录被写下来。她说过一句话让我一直记得，我意义，就这2个字，简单有力，但背后是一整个人生，一整个对法律和人的尊严的信念。我们下次见咯。Hello everyone, I'm Jenny. Welcome to Thinker J. The person we are talking about today. You may have seen her photograph online. A small older woman wearing round glasses, a black judicial robe, a lace collar around her neck. She looks slight. She looks quiet. But do you know? The most hardline conservative politicians in America were afraid of her. Her name was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. People call ED her RBG. She was a justice of the United States Supreme Court, and one of the most important driving forces behind the legal revolution for gender equality in 20th century America. She was 154 centimeters tall. She weighed less than 50 kilograms. But over the course of decades, one case at a time, one opinion at a time, she changed the legal standing of women in America. She said she did not do these things to be remembered. She did them so that the next generation of girls would have a world she never had when she was young. Today we are going to talk about RBG, a woman who used the law as her instrument, a woman who kept working through every hardship, a woman who refused to leave the field until the very last moment. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was born on March 15, 1933. She was born in Brooklyn, New York. Her father Nathan Bader was a Jewish immigrant from Ukraine. Her mother Celia Bader was more educated than her father. Celia was a highly intelligent woman, but her generation did not give her the chance of higher education. Celia poured all her hunger for learning into her daughter. She told young Ruth, "Be an independent person. Be a person who can support herself." Celia died the day before Ruth graduated from high school. That day Ruth did not cry. She said her mother had taught her that tears solve nothing. But the words her mother left her, she carried for the rest of her life. In 1950, Ruth enrolled ED at Cornell University. She majored in government. And there she met the man who would become her husband, Martin Ginsburg. Martin was a remarkable person. He was rare among men of that era. He genuinely believed in his wife's intelligence and abilities. His admiration for Ruth was completely sincere. He said of everyone he had ever known, Ruth was the smartest. They married shortly after Ruth graduated from Cornell. In 1956, Ruth enrolled ED at Harvard Law School. That year the entering class had more than 500 students. 9 of them were women. The dean held a reception for these 9 women at his home. And then he asked them a question. He asked each of them to explain why they were occupying a place that could have gone to a man. Ruth said she gave an answer. She said she was there to understand her husband's work, so she could better support his career. She said later it was one of the most absurd lies she ever told. But in that era it was the only answer that would be accepted. At Harvard she became a member of the Harvard Law Review, the most prestigious academic journal at the law school. Her grades were outstanding. But at the same time, her husband Martin was diagnosed with testicular cancer. In the 1950s that diagnosis was nearly a death sentence. While nursing her sick husband, Ruth continued attending her own classes. She also attended Martin's classes for him, organized his notes, so he could follow his studies from his sickbed. Martin recovered. But because of Martin's work, Ruth had to move to New York after 2 years at Harvard. She transferred to Columbia Law School. She completed her final year there, and graduated at the top of her class. First in her class at Columbia Law School. Also a member of the Harvard Law Review. By any measure she should have had no trouble finding a good position. But no law firm would hire her. The reasons were 3. She was a woman. She was Jewish. She was a mother. 3 barriers that in that era seemed nearly impossible to overcome. Every door was shut. She said later she knew exactly what she was facing. She said she had no time to be angry. She said she needed to find another path. She eventually entered academia. She became a law professor at Rutgers University. Later she joined the faculty at Columbia Law School. She was the first woman ever to receive tenure at Columbia Law School. While teaching, she began her systematic research and legal challenge to gender-based discrimination in American law. In 1972, she founded the Women's Rights Project at the American Civil Liberties Union. The project's goal was to use litigation, case by case, to dismantle the systematic discrimination against women in the American legal framework. Her strategy was extraordinarily clever. Rather than choosing the most obvious cases of women suffering discrimination, she selected cases where men were experiencing gender-based discrimination. She knew, if she could make male judges understand what it felt like to be treated unfairly because of sex, she would be more likely to win their support. For example, she took a case involving a man named Charles Moritz. He had been denied a tax deduction for caring for his elderly mother, because he was male. The law at the time considered elder care to be a woman's responsibility. Men were not entitled to the deduction. Ruth took that case all the way to federal court. And won. She said there was an interesting moment in that case. When she compiled a list of every law that treated men and women differently. The list ran to 100 pages. The attorneys at the Department of Defense saw the list. And were alarmed. Because they said if all these laws were unconstitutional, many military regulations would need to change as well. Ruth said she thought to herself, yes, exactly. In 1980, President Carter appointed her to the United States Court of Appeals. She served in that role for 13 years, building a deep reputation in law. In 1993, President Clinton nominated her to the Supreme Court of the United States. She became only the second woman ever to serve as a Supreme Court justice. Sandra Day O'Connor had been the first. On the Supreme Court, Ginsburg quickly became known for her dissenting opinions. Whenever the majority of justices reached a decision she believed was wrong, she would write a powerful dissent. Her dissents were not only legal documents. They were clearly argued declarations, telling everyone, this ruling is wrong. Here is why. And history will correct this error. One famous example. In 2006 the Supreme Court ruled against a female employee in a gender pay discrimination case. The majority rejected her claim on procedural grounds. Ginsburg wrote a forceful dissent. She argued that the ruling ignored how the real world actually works. Pay discrimination accumulates gradually. Victims often do not discover it for a long time. Her dissent sparked wide public debate, and ultimately led Congress to pass new legislation in 2009, based directly on the arguments she had made in that dissenting opinion. That was Ginsburg's way. Her dissents were not simply expressions of disagreement. They were pushing a conversation forward. They were telling the future. She had expectations of the future. During her years on the Supreme Court, she also faced serious health challenges. In 1999 she was diagnosed with colon cancer. In 2009 with pancreatic cancer. Lung surgery in 2018. And then pancreatic cancer again in 2020. Every single time, she returned to the Supreme Court bench in the shortest possible time. One story is widely told. Less than 2 weeks after her colon cancer surgery in 1999, she appeared for oral arguments at the Supreme Court. No one in that courtroom knew how frail she was at that moment. She said she had to be there, because there was work to do. In the 2010s something unexpected happened in American social media. A Supreme Court justice in her 70s became a cultural icon for young people. People started calling her the notorious RBG. Her face appeared on t-shirts. Her words appeared on stickers. Her lace collar became a symbol of both authority and resistance. She said she was surprised and glad about all of this. She said if more young people became interested in law and civil rights, then it was all worth it. On September 18, 2020, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died of complications from pancreatic cancer. She was 87 years old. When the news broke, tens of thousands of people gathered on the steps of the Supreme Court. They lit candles. They planted flowers on the steps. They wept. They stood in silence. Many people said that night they felt they had lost something important. Not only a judge, but a belief that the law could achieve justice. Ginsburg said something during her lifetime that has stayed with me. She was asked how long she planned to serve on the Supreme Court. Her answer was, until I am unable to do the job. She kept her word. The life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg leaves us with several things. The first is this: strategy and justice can walk together. In fighting the legal battles for gender equality, she did not use anger as her weapon. She used precise strategic thinking. She understood that to persuade your opponents, you sometimes have to start from where they can understand. That takes wisdom and patience. The second is this: physical limitation cannot define what a person contributes. Over several decades she faced serious illness again and again. But she returned to her seat every time. She said work gave her strength. She said as long as she could do it, she would keep doing it. The third is this: dissent is a form of love. Her written dissents were her way of saying she disagreed, but at a deeper level. Those dissent opinions were letters she was writing to the future, the clearest expressions of her belief in law and in the dignity of people. She believed the future would correct today's mistakes. She wanted to make certain the record was written down. She said something I have always remembered: I dissent. Just those two words. Simple, powerful, but behind them, an entire lifetime. An entire belief in law and in the dignity of human beings. See you next time.